Great. All right. So thank you everybody for joining us, and Sam and Stephanie as well for joining to answer questions today. So my name is Shagithya Deivendran. I'll be introducing some of our strategic work around the automated vehicles work here at the city, and then I'll be passing it along to Lindsay, who will introduce our automated shuttle trial. Great. So some of the information I'll be providing today, just really quickly, a brief background on automated vehicles for anyone who is new to the technology. I'll be going into some details around the tactical plan and then what we plan to do to be AV ready by 2022 here at the city. So really just wanted to provide some background on the various levels of automated vehicles. People tend to think of fully autonomous or driverless cars when they are thinking about automated vehicles, but there is a scale of automation. So we do see level 1 and 2 automation on our roads today in the form of lane keeping, steering control, etc. Higher levels really begin at level 3+. At level 4 is when we begin to see driverless, but they are usually limited to geofenced areas or have various other limitations. And then at level 5 is when we see fully autonomous vehicles, so cars that can really drive across a range of scenarios. So in terms of when AVs will arrive on city streets, we've heard a number of predictions from various auto manufacturers as well as technology companies. So we've sort of gathered them based on some of the announcements that have been made, but what we will say is that we've seen these predictions changed and pushed out as a lot of the various difficulties around perfecting this technology have arose. So just to reiterate that as of 2018 to 2019, we are seeing again level 2, and that higher levels are predicted to come over the next few years, but this is not for certain. In terms of higher levels of adoption, we just really wanted to show what the predictions are and what the research has shown around the long-term assumptions as well. So this is 4 different predicted timelines that have been shared via research. And we really just wanted to highlight that by 2030 is when you begin to see higher market penetration for automated vehicles. But by 2050 is really when you'd see the transportation system realign. So infrastructure changes, various road changes, based on the adoption rates from the general public. In terms of automated vehicles in Toronto, a lot of our work started out with staff discussions and strategizing via an interdivisional working group across the City of Toronto, which I'll share a little bit more about. But really our work started back in 2016 when our City Council asked us to report on staff preparations, implications of the technology, and public acceptance. We've reported back as of 2018 in January, where we were given additional direction, including creating a more comprehensive document around our strategy, which is called the Automated Vehicles Tactical Plan. We also went in 2018 to receive authority for our Automated Shuttle Trial, which Lindsay will speak a little bit about. And then in 2019, actually a few weeks ago, our full plan was adopted by City Council, which was a great win for us. And we are currently in the phase of beginning to implement what these actions could look like. So referring to our interdivisional working group that I referenced, we do have about 30 different divisions and agencies involved across the City of Toronto in preparing for this technology. And this is really because it's been recognized that this is not just a transportation issue, it's much broader than that. Notably, the Toronto Transit Commission and thankfully Stephanie, who's on the call with us today, have been involved from the TTC's perspective. So definitely a range of opinions and input from across the city. Where we really started in creating this document was recognizing that this technology should not be seen as disrupting the way we at the City of Toronto do our work today. We really think it could be harnessed as a tool to really push forward our existing goals. So we started out by looking at our existing approved strategies and policies across the City of Toronto, everything from the official plan to Transform TO to Vision Zero, which is our road safety plan, and really tried to pull out any of the areas that could be impacted by automated vehicles. From there, we really tried to figure out what the gaps were and what we needed to address. Where we landed is 7 sections or various directions on what we think we should be looking at around automated vehicles, including social equity and health, environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, privacy, road safety and security, integrated mobility, and transportation system efficiency. I will be speaking to some of the more transit-focused actions that we're looking at and provide some more detail on that throughout this presentation as well. Internally, we're also looking at our public service vehicles, future-proofing, the long-term impacts, as well as data governance. So there are actually 4 levels to our plan. At the highest level is the direction, so those are the 7 sections, and this really highlights what our vision is across the city. The level below that is a 2050 goal. So the purpose of this was we really need to set out what the long-term vision is for the City of Toronto to explain why we're taking the actions we aim to take. So our 2050 goals are framed as sort of subsections that really highlight what the focuses should be, looking at our long-term vision. The bulk of the plan are our tactics. These are the actions that we want to take, and there is not a set timeline for each of these tactics. We recognize that some things can be done in the short term over the next 5 to 10 years, whereas some others will need to be done over 30 years or longer. So really recognizing the various timelines around this. And then the very last level is our progress to 2022. So what we want to do over the next 3 years to begin working on some of these actions. So that could be everything from just researching and learning to actually implementing some of our work, which the shuttle, I think, is one of our big examples around what we will be implementing. So the next few slides will really speak to each of the tactics that are incorporated in the plan. I'll really quickly skim over them, but I'm happy to take any questions if you're interested in anything in more detail. So under social equity and health, we do speak to barrier-free access. So as you'll see, looking at our transit is also included there, but we also look at low-income individuals, non-Anglophones, etc. We also look at ensuring that we have equitable service coverage, equitable performance standards across geographies. So really understanding how we can ensure that these mobility services are equitably distributed. Environmental sustainability is really built on our existing climate action goals. So focusing on lower zero carbon energy sources, looking at the waste that could be produced by the life cycle of these vehicles. Around economic sustainability, we do have a few different actions we'd like to take. I think the one relevant piece that we'll be working on over the next 3 years is looking at how we can bolster our local transit sector as well. So right now there's a lot being done internally, but looking at what sort of companies we can really assist in moving forward here within the City of Toronto as well. Privacy is definitely a big one for us. There are a lot of cybersecurity and privacy concerns that have been raised with this technology. So looking at what sort of standards we need to set, what sort of principles we need to be incorporating outright to ensure that this technology is introduced in a safe way. Road safety and security is our most comprehensive section. We speak to everything from preventing collisions and including looking at the transition to when these vehicles will be introduced. So you'll see the first 2 tactics are around the transition to AVs, and we have one specific to transit. And this is really just ensuring that as we see a mix of lower levels of automation and higher levels of automation, as well as our various modes on one road, ensuring that our infrastructure and our regulations and our policies really work towards a safe mix of all of these vehicles. We also look at our infrastructure again, so any sort of updates we may need to make over the short or long term. We reference our emergency response and cybersecurity impacts in this section as well. I won't go too much into this, but again, happy to take questions. Our 6th section is around integrated mobility. So a lot of people assume that our focus on automated vehicles means a focus on private passenger vehicles, and this is definitely not the case. We are taking a transit-centric approach. We're also trying to prioritize our active modes as we always have been. So including all of those space-efficient goals within this section as well. We look at our streets as well as system seamlessness. So mobility as a service and microtransit are big actions for the city here as well, focusing again on our transit. And then the very last section of the plan looks at our transportation system efficiency. So some of the congestion issues that we anticipate or are already facing. So looking at how we can increase system capacity, either through active traffic management or some of the data opportunities we have, as well as managing system demand. So looking at fees, pricing, incentives, et cetera, to ensure that our most efficient modes, which of course lead to the transit and moving as many people as we can, are prioritized where we can. And then the very last section I wanted to speak to is our public service vehicles, because internally we are also looking at how we can improve our services by incorporating automation, even at low levels for safety improvements. So just referencing some of those actions here as well. And then before I pass it over to Lindsay, our 5 major projects over the next 3 years around improving our vision through this tactical plan include first our automated shuttle trial, which I won't go too much into since we will be discussing that in more detail. But also we're looking at transportation innovation zones, so establishing a process and location for transportation innovation in the City of Toronto. So understanding that we're receiving a lot of requests or inquiries from various vendors and understanding how we can incorporate that in a way that really bolsters what the city wants to do. The third project is our testing, response, and incident preparedness plan, and this is really in response to the changes from the Ontario government around the automated vehicle pilot project. So in January of last year, driverless vehicle testing as well as commercial sale of level 3 vehicles and platooning was introduced. But with that came some new requirements around notifying municipalities if there is testing on their streets in a driverless situation, as well as providing an emergency response preparedness plan in a driverless situation. So we as a city want to be prepared for these notifications internally as well. Our fourth project on human learning is really just focused on public education and ensuring that all road users know how to interact with automated vehicles regardless of their form. And then finally, research and development is our last major project over the next 3 years. And this really speaks to some of the issues that we want to continue learning about, some of the long-term impacts that we want to continue to investigate. So thank you from me on really introducing this part of the plan. We wanted to point you to our website as well if you'd like some more information. And I'll pass it over to Lindsay.
Thanks, Shagithya. So I think that was a really great framing, in particular to show just the fact that our automated vehicle team is working on a whole lot of stuff. So I'm just going to zoom in for the next 10 minutes or so on the automated shuttle trial specifically. As Oliver mentioned, we're joined on the phone as well by our colleagues at TTC, Stephanie, and Metrolinx, Dan, who work very closely with us on this project. And so hopefully they'll help me field questions at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to touch on 3 things briefly. One is just sort of our goals around learning about the potential for automation in the transit system. The second is telling you a little bit about the project, and then some early thoughts on some of the lessons that we're learning. So automated vehicles, not just about cars. I think as Shagithya shared, our automated vehicles tactical plan at the city is really oriented toward making sure that we're thinking about all kinds of automation in the transportation system, and in particular, thinking about ways to support Torontonians in continuing to use shared modes of transportation. And so one of the mottos that was kind of developed around this shuttle trial that we have is we'd like for Torontonians' first experience with vehicle automation to be on a transit vehicle. And that's really kind of the origin of our interest in piloting this technology. So this is a joint project in full partnership with TTC and Metrolinx, with funding from Transport Canada. And our goal is to test the ability of an automated transit shuttle to fill an existing unmet need in the transit system. And so it's really important, I think, to keep coming back to this objective of the project. For us, it's a little bit less about testing the technology itself and a little bit more about testing its integration into our transit system and also into our organizations, the way we do things, the kinds of skills that we have, and the opportunities we have to perhaps provide even more service to Torontonians. So as I mentioned, this is a partnership between TTC, Metrolinx, and the city. The funding comes from a funding program from Transport Canada called Advancing Connectivity and Automation in the Transportation System. And this was a one-time, I believe, funding opportunity. So our organizations applied to this opportunity back in 2017, I believe, and were successful. And so there's a steering committee comprised of individuals from each of our organizations that jointly make decisions on the project. So we set for ourselves, when we set up the project, a number of objectives, and I'm just going to go through them quickly. The first 5 are really about capacity building and learning for our organizations. And so learning about the technical requirements to operate the shuttle, administrative requirements, how it interacts with our other vehicles and other systems, what the human response is, and really what the value is of an automated shuttle service. And so as I'll mention in a moment, we're testing one potential use case, which is filling more of a geographical gap in the transit system, but there may be other use cases, and we may or may not learn that this application is appropriate or works in our context. The second set of objectives is a little bit more external focusing, and so sort of lining up with our automated vehicles tactical plan in general. We want to increase public awareness, I suppose, of the use of innovation in the transit system and the transportation system more broadly. We want to also increase the attractiveness of Toronto as a place where companies are attracted to come start up or develop these kinds of technologies and services, and we want to continue to provide leadership. So what is an automated shuttle? This is a new kind of transit technology. We've seen sort of a number of different actors emerge on the market. There are different variations, but in general, most shuttles are electric powered. These are low-speed vehicles, so maxing out at 20 kilometers an hour, oftentimes actually slower, carrying passengers somewhere maybe between 8 to 12. Often it's sort of bench seating around the perimeter of a vehicle. So Shagithya talked a little bit about the levels of automation, and we see these coming in at a level where they're able to conduct a range of driving activities in an automated mode, but some human oversight is still required. And so we do expect that there will be a human operator or attendant who's on board at all times. This person will be responsible for overseeing the vehicle's operations and taking control if ever that's necessary, but also they will continue to provide the kinds of customer service functions that you would anticipate from any other transit service in the city. And thirdly, that person will also support data collection and observation. So we really want to have eyes on the ground and see how people are interacting with the vehicle, how the vehicle is interacting with its surroundings. So through work with our partners at TTC and Metrolinx, we have selected a preliminary preferred location. It's to serve the West Rouge neighbourhood, which is in the far east of Scarborough within the city of Toronto. We chose this location for a number of reasons. Our groups worked together to set out a number of sort of selection criteria. Initially, we had a long list of locations and sort of whittled it down. One of the most important things was that we did want to test the possibility to fill a geographical gap. And so we identified a location that fell outside of TTC's 400-meter service area. So the service coverage is seen in yellow in this map, and then the gray zones are the spots that are not served. And we also wanted to be in close proximity to a major transit hub, in this case, the Rouge Hill GO station, so that we had the opportunity to provide sort of a first mile, last mile service. We also, through working with Metrolinx, were able to understand that there are a really high proportion of folks from this neighborhood who A, are using the GO station, and B, are driving there. And it's a driving trip that's well under 2 kilometers. And so, and parking is at capacity of the station. So there's a real opportunity to offer something attractive here. These are just some of the other technical requirements that we use to select the route. And so I won't read through all of them, but as an example, we couldn't have the distance be too long because it's a low speed vehicle. We wanted somewhere with relatively low traffic volumes and some other technical criteria as well. So our plan is to launch the service about a year from now in fall 2020. We'd like to pilot it for a significant chunk of time, somewhere between 6 to 12 months. And this is fairly in contrast with some of the other demonstrations that have been done of these vehicles, which are more for a range of a couple of weeks. And so this is really something where we want to start to see how it sort of embeds itself in the system and also how it performs in different seasonal conditions. There's no intention to charge a fare. And the idea right now, although all of the details will be confirmed once we have a vendor on board, is to do a morning and evening sort of rush hour service. Both to connect with the GO trains and also because since we anticipate the vehicle will be electric, there's probably a need for it to charge for a little while during the day as well. So just to give you a sense of the timeline, we've been working hard on the service planning and preparations since 2018. This fall, we have initiated public consultation in the local community and are working toward soon issuing a request for proposals in order to procure that service. And then we'll be moving forward with planning and launch in 2020. So I just want to say a few things about lessons learned before we open it up for questions. One is to say, this is a rapidly evolving market. And so our team was able to issue a request for information about a year and a half ago. And one of the things we heard from potential vendors through that is that, this is what we have to offer right now. But if you come back with an RFP in 18 months or 2 years, things may have evolved or changed. And so this is kind of a challenge, I think, for all of us working in the innovation space. applying conventional regulation to new surfaces. And so when we look at some of the, say, provincial regulations around using the right-of-way and city rules as well, we see that we didn't really anticipate this size or this nature of vehicle. And so beyond the fact that it's automated, there are a number of, there's a lot of thinking we've had to do around how sort of the existing rules would apply to the operation of such a vehicle. Building staff capacity. And so obviously this was an explicit goal for us, and I would say that we definitely have been learning and building capacity around some issues that perhaps traditionally transportation staff or even transit agency staff aren't necessarily pulled into, around questions like cybersecurity, privacy, vehicle safety, and more. And so we're really trying to document this process because we think moving forward, these will be things that we'll need to think about more and more as automated vehicles emerge. And then finally, just thinking about opportunities to shift toward more innovative procurement. And so when we're trying to procure in a market that is changing and with technologies that are new, I think we know that some of the ways that the city does procurement are not particularly flexible. And so thinking about what our opportunities might be going forward as well to be able to operate in that environment. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm sure Oliver has been compiling questions. And we'd be happy to hear from you. I think one thing I would say, and I know this is a bit difficult on a webinar, but we'd also be interested, I think, in feedback or comments from folks on the call as well. And one of the things I would say, because I know there's a number of people from transit agencies on the line, is, you know, we have a base evaluation plan for the shuttle, but I'd be really interested to hear from folks on, you know, if it was up to you, how would you measure success in something like this, and what would you be looking for? So if you want to leave us comments in that sense, we'd be happy to have them as well. And thanks so much.